Good evening, friends. Let us listen to Swami Kriyanandaji's quote from this today. It's November 29th. Think of others not as your competitors, but as your colleagues, even when working in the same field of endeavor as they. 1,000 rivulets conjoining become a mighty river. Thus, indeed, are great civilizations born. It's a very beautiful, practical quote of day-to-day, application, but it may seem paradoxical initially, and especially if we do not give it deep thought, or how we have been discussing sometimes, we don't use discrimination. It can seem slightly paradoxical because competition is what we always think, we hear that word almost every day. We read it in the newspapers, in advertisements. Perhaps that is an attitude instilled actually it is in schools, colleges, workplaces. Yet Swami is suggesting something over here of, you might say it's a cousin brother because I looked up the history behind those words, cooperation and competition, and they both have Latin origins. Compete means... Co means, of course, together, and compete means to work, to basically aim for something together, whereas cooperation, as you can see, cooperate, to operate, to work, means to work together. And they seem similar, but there could be a sea of a difference in the fruits that we, get from them. Now, of course, at the very beginning, let me dismiss any thoughts if you have that, is he going to talk against competition, which is so healthy, or as we know, there is healthy competition. But no, friends, competition is very important, but I'd like to start with some stories and see to what degree, the spectrum can be made very wide. Human beings have that gift, you might say. We go from, end to end sometimes, whereas all we needed to do was to walk the middle path, acknowledge something for what it is, but and also to sometimes see things as a tool, or as Swamiji said, as a vehicle, and certainly not an end in itself. For example, we know, I believe many of the people who are watching this video are yoga practitioners or they meditate. When we meditate, especially when we do a pranayam or a technique, we are trying to basically cooperate with our body. Like I said in the beginning, let's focus on the breath, let's control the breath. When we sleep, for example, all of us, by and large, wake up more energized, enthusiastic. Well, we didn't do anything special at that time. We just went with the nature's flow that it was time to rest. We cooperate with certain things, and we see that actually just going in that flow, they turn out to be for best. Likewise, in a technique of meditation, for example, Master says, do not, as important as it is, as important as books are, as important as the living personality, you might say, of a guru, a friend, a beloved is, he said, do not mistake it to be the goal. And I will come to that discussion towards the end of our satsang today, that as yoga practitioners, what we are really looking to cooperate with is the higher consciousness, awareness. More and more people every day, actually, in all cultures, are asking a question: what is life? And isn't it so interesting that so many people are tuning into that thought? It's as if we are being propelled, which we are actually. Yoganandaji's guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, he actually said we are in an age, upward moving age of enlightenment, age of Dwapar. He said where people will realize that in working in harmony with energy, now we have atomic energy outside. It can be used for good purpose. It can be used for very, very harmful purposes. And often as we see that we begin with some accident, I sometimes think those accidents, as big as they may seem, they are still stepping stones to learn what sometimes not to do. And he said, as we move into this age, more and more people will try to tune into their own inner conscience. That is, you might say, consciousness also on one level, that within us, we have this ability to say, okay, this is the right decision for me. This is what I was seeking. Or as we often find ourselves, as I was saying, the world is finding itself questioning, what am I really doing? Again, to give a very simple example on today evening's theme, competition versus cooperation. In Pune at least, and I'm sure this is the case with many other cities, but here we see a lot of corporate culture, IT culture. People are saying that I'm tired of competing. I don't even know who I'm competing against, and why should I? And competition of a level where, as business, which is kind of a religion today, again, people have forgotten it was simply a means to an end. Ananda ji said actually the three essentials that everyone needs on this planet are food, some clothing, and shelter. He says, now, if somebody is happy with a very simple attainment of these three, you could say he has found happiness. Why this constant push, urge, and to compete more, to do more? He says, well, the fellow is happy. You may want more and more of it, he said, but again, like I said, each person has to feel where to draw his line. But as those topics are so similar, but sometimes, they are divergent, I want to give a few examples so that we can then develop our understanding on those. We think competition is very important, but let's look at our body. Now, are our body parts competing with each other whenever we are trying to do something, whether it is exercise of an extreme order or deep relaxation of sleep, or do they cooperate? For example, when we go to sleep, our eyes automatically shut down. The organs understand it's time to rest. They actually go into, restful mode. The heart slows down, breath rate slows down, the mind slows down. Actually, if the body cooperates, and that's why we should practice, let's say, some yoga when we wake up or before we go to sleep, you see that if the body is free from tensions, it is much, much easier for us to go to sleep. So that is again a sign of cooperation. When we eat, when there is an injury, there is an intelligence in our body which just knows where to reach, how to stop an infection. Temperature of the body rising. Maybe I'm giving these examples more because I'm a doctor, but it just shows us that it is inbuilt. Likewise, let's think of something man-made, a car. The best cars are those where the functioning is seamless, very smooth. All the parts, all the engines, you might say the engine and the ignition, the movement of the whole, nowadays there are electric cars, they are all in sync with each other. Sometimes actually a smart car will even tell you when it is time to get its servicing done. So again, they are listening to one another, they are cooperating with each other. Swami Kriyananda would give another example. And actually, he himself in the West was known as the father of world brotherhood communities. Swamiji was the founder of Ananda village and subsequent communities, Ananda Sangha worldwide. Now, what is a cooperative community? He would give that example. He said, imagine you're living in a village with 1,000 people. And you could think of actually any high civilization, because Swamiji is calling us, challenging us, actually the reader, to that order, that what is a civilization after all? A civilization is nothing but it's made up of civilians. You and I are those individuals which you might say represent, that civilization. A civilization by itself is actually nothing. People gauge, when they gauge actually nowadays how happy a country is, the country does not speak. They go and meet a certain number of individuals, and based on that, as we know, we decide that yes, this is how it is. And Swami said, if you think of a high civilization, if you think of 1,000 people, for example, in a village, if you're competing with them, he said, you will soon have 999 enemies. But, he said, if you are cooperating with them, you will have that many friends. Now, what do we want? He would often give the example of Stalin. Actually, Stalin was not the Soviet leader's name, actually. I don't remember, but his was another name. He took that surname, Stalin. Joseph was his first name, but he took that second name, Stalin. And Yogananda ji said he once met, actually, Stalin's driver. And the driver told Master, Yogananda ji, he said, whenever I would drive Stalin, he would sit in the back seat and he would repeatedly, many times affirm, I am Stalin. I am Stalin. And Stalin means steel. And Swami says, in the corporate culture, especially that we see around, he said, where people say, oh, wipe them out, buy them out, throw them out. I don't care how people what they are faced with. Swami says, well, first of all, you think you have no options. I think you have many options. Let's take Stalin's example. He had great power, control over his people. He was their leader. Couldn't he have strengthened his own country? Couldn't he have channeled those energies within? Couldn't he have secured good relationships, let's say, with his neighbors, becoming friends, promised them perhaps? What else do you do with strength? Strength is wonderful. There's no problem with strength. When it starts getting misused, that's when his troubles began. And how was the end? The end was very sad. He almost, they say, went paranoid, because when we have hurt somebody so much, and again I was speaking of corporate culture, Kriyanandaji said he knew of a person who would repeatedly tell his employees, gather them and tell them that the one who could be, you might say, almost most ruthless and get the maximum profit would get the apple, so to say. But Swami says, when you are moving in that direction, you think you're hurting others, but he said the one person who will have to be steeled from those fears, paranoia, those tensions, he said, is yourself. Whereas now it's good to compete, like I said in the beginning, but competing with whom? Compete with yourself. Compete with your level of creativity. Compete with diversity. I know of a business group where I was recently told their dharma, their model is not to throw out somebody out of business, but just to retain enough of just to keep themselves in business so they can continue to do charitable acts of a very great magnitude. And sometimes you see some of the greatest philanthropists, not just in terms of money, but in terms of their works, their desire, the kind of energy they are putting out. They are not very, very big people. They are sometimes actually very hidden names. It surprises people when they read sometimes these lists of people who are helping others. So competition is good, but like I said, we want to compete with ourselves in a team. You want to tell people, yes, be creative, but now another thought people have is, why do I need to be in a team in the first place? Now many scientists, breakthroughs, artists, they live alone, perhaps sometimes on hilltops, but that's okay, friends. Kriyanandaji used to say, he said, I have myself written most of my books, he says, personally, individually, just like in a setting. He said, I may have discussed ideas. Nonetheless, he says, I wrote it for an audience, which he said, I would, before writing any book, compose into a single individual, you might say. It's like the nation, the civilization, what consciousness is of a particular nation, its people. He said, I would condense the consciousness of the audience, my audience, into one person, and he said, then I would speak to that. And it helped him bring that clarity in his books. So many times we think, oh, I don't need teamwork. But like I think there is this ancient saying, if you want to go fast, travel alone. If you want to go far, travel with others. That the legacy, think of Buddha. Was he any less powerful? If you think especially the story of Angulimal, the fellow who was wearing a ring, a garland of people's fingers. Think of Jesus. Power, divinity personified. Think of Paramahansa Yogananda. How did their work, their consciousness, how did their words take root in the hearts of you and me and many, many others? Through others, through groups, through teams, you might say, through spiritual family. What is organization after all? People make too much of it nowadays. Again, a simple word which can be misunderstood. I have come to understand, and I try to peel that definition deeper and deeper every day. Organization, truly understood, friends, is nothing but family. Kriyanandaji used to say you can call your body an organism, one organism which is operating. You can actually, he said in the greater analysis, call the planet one organism. Earlier, people used to think, oh, it doesn't matter which country is creating pollution. Actually, they used to discard their garbage, unfortunately, and in other countries. Now they are realizing the ocean tides, the wind, the fires, the volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, many of which are man-made, actually, very logically, they are disturbing everybody. So, again, to say that we want to, when we are working individually, it has a certain power, and you might say like the brain is that leader, or that or the heart. Sometimes it is always between the brain and the heart. The feeling and the reasoning can be at the top, but then a lot of others are required to do the work. Now when we are working in a team, we want individuals to compete with themselves, if at all we want to use that word, to develop greater strength of body, of their mind, their emotions, their reasoning faculty, their ability to understand what's really trying to happen. That should be reviewed every day by each individual. It should not be, because see, sometimes people say, okay, we are a team and we work cooperatively. We are not in competition with any ourselves, but then they may get together to compete with someone else. Because it does not matter. It's beyond their geographical, you might say, it's not their office. They're competing with another office. No, that's not good either. We do not want to put out that kind of energy. But when we work on ourselves, it reminds me of the story of Saint Francis, actually, who in the beginning, he was leading an ordinary life, you might say, a very happy life outwardly. But then at a certain point, he started saying, how can I be of use to other people? Because it started bringing him greater happiness. How can I cooperate with those laws, the human nature itself? And finally, when even that didn't help to bring him greater happiness, which is what we are really seeking even in competition. And that's why competition is a good starter, you might say. He started saying, he asked Christ one time in a church, he was praying, why am I not happy all the time? And he heard the voice, because you don't have me. Francis, Christ spoke to him, what does it mean to have God? How can we have God on the path of yoga? Many saints, Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda included, they said it finally comes by cooperating with grace. It is not a struggle. It does not actually involve the kind of effort we put out in the world. It is simply accepting what is trying to happen, that you and I are part of a greater reality. Like Sri Yukteswarji said, true spiritual progress starts only when one has accepted the inescapability of the cosmic law. Which law? The law of duality, the incoming and outgoing breath, the coming of summer and winter, the day and night, life and death. That this world, it's good to cooperate with it on whatever levels for physical harmony. But friends, then we need within ourselves, the body and the mind should be in harmony. The feelings have to be brought into harmony. And once that has happened, then we move into spiritual domains, and we said, but are these 100 years all that I am seeking perfection of? No, then we understand there are greater laws in place. Karma comes into place. How do you accept karma? How do you overcome karma? By calmly again accepting it. Who helps us overcome karma? Whose grace are we really trying to cooperate with? Ultimately, God's. How is it expressed? Through an enlightened being, through the Guru. Yogananda ji and many of the masters in our line would remind their disciples, I need, he said, Master Lahari Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswarji, they said, unconditional obedience, which is willingness, and unconditional love. Why love? Because our egos do not want to cooperate with that process. We may wish it away. We try to forget those laws as if thinking they don't exist. But ultimately cooperating with those, first by accepting it, secondly by expressing willingness and willpower, and after that energy, enthusiasm, perseverance. I said continued discrimination. What is discrimination? Many times discrimination does not come to us. Why? Because now you may say, everything, sir, is either good or bad, and those themselves are relative. So where does the question of, being one way or the other even arise? Why is goodness better than being bad? Because if we align ourselves with goodness, with good people, good environment, good books, good actions and thoughts, then we come to realize that such a higher dimension actually does exist. And I want to really, God is not one way or the other. We may say, oh, but God created these laws, and we may try to wash our hands away from this. Oh, I'm just being the way the society is. Well, God does not mind it actually one way or the other. He has created these, you might say, two rules for this evening that we are discussing. Competition with others, fiercely, let's say, that's one end of the spectrum, and then there is cooperation. If we go with one, we will be more and more and more influenced by it to the point of becoming indifferent to it, where we do not see what is wrong with it. On the other hand, as Swamiji said, as we cooperate with others, which is a genuine feeling for their well-being, for guiding them, it requires a lot of patience. It's like parenting, spiritual parenting. Then we say, no, it is in giving that I am receiving. Everybody in my team is bringing a unique quality. I don't want to travel alone. I want to travel with everybody. Then working in an organization becomes actually the greatest opportunity for growth, practicing spiritual teachings and helping other people. That is the lesson Sri Yukteswarji gave to Yogananda. So I want to read it once again, and then I'll close with a song of Swamiji, that think of others as your colleagues, and especially those which are in the same endeavor. And actually those are the people we interact with. Thousands of rivulets conjoining become a mighty river, and thus indeed are great civilizations born. One great civilization's friend was India in the higher ages. And what was its one message? Unity among diversity, where God's song, creativity flows uniquely through each individual. Nowadays, people have been reduced to statistics, numbers. It won't bring happiness to those who suffer. It won't bring happiness to those who lead such systems. I want to close with this song of Swami Kriyananda. He wrote it for children. All the world is my friend when I learn how to share my love, when I stretch out my hand and smile, when I live from above. When we stretch our hand to help others, to cooperate with them, when we extend that smile, when we go beyond selfishness, egos, personal likes and dislikes, when we love, that is the basis of leadership, that is the basis of teamwork, that is the basis of correcting other people. And finally, when we live from above, what does that mean? When we bring the energy at this point, where unity exists, yoga, the whole goal of yoga, of ethics, of morals, is to bring the energy at this point of union, where duality does not exist. We see everything, everybody, even the worst of sinners, Krishna says, comes quickly to me by meditating on me. Meditation, like I have said in all my previous satsangs, proper posture, deep nasal breathing, serving other people. These are the ways to bring our energy to that focus where and actually Swamiji used to say this is the seat of cooperation also, willpower. So we want to apply ourselves to that end. So let's think more about it. Maybe as a small, you might say, assignment, we could make a list to see where are we being excessively competitive. With ourselves, like I said, yes, we want to work, but when it comes to others, how can we change the direction and apply more of cooperation, encouragement, enjoying others' success? That is the mark of a refined soul. And turn our life in that direction to see the spiritual benefits we can reap over there. Jai Guru.